Welcome to CIS195, Week 10. This week we'll be discussing HTML tables. For this lecture, we're going to be creating this table that I have pre-created in Word, and we're actually going to create this in an HTML page. Some things to consider about this table is the fact that we have a total of 5 rows and a total of 7 columns. Some of these columns have been combined together, and some of the rows have been combined together as well. So this just isn't a standard table. There's some changes to it that we will have to make as we move along. So we start the table off with the table tag. And then within the table tag, we are going to start off by building the rows within the table. So the next thing we're going to put in here is we're going to use a tag called a TR, which is a row. So in the table that we're looking to recreate here, our first row has mission name, launch date, mission details, and country in it. So within this row, we have to put the columns. In a HTML table, those columns are identified by a TD tag, which indicates data. So the first TD that we're replacing here is this mission name. So I'll go ahead and type mission name here. I've already put the web page up here so that we can see what's happening as we move along. So let's go ahead and let's look at that. Alright, so we've got the first portion of our table set up here, the mission name. Let me go ahead and put the rest of these names in here. So we'll do a TD, launch date, a TD, mission details, and the final one, the country. Now, I'm not going to span these two columns just yet. We'll get back to that here in just a moment. Let's go ahead and look up here and look what this looks like. Okay, so this is what an HTML table will look like. Now, it looks kind of awful in a way because everything is kind of pushed together and not separated. So what we really need to do, as in this table is here, we need to put some borders around this. Now, borders are put on the table using a style. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to add at the top of our page in a style element. We're going to style the table itself to start with. We're going to give it a border. And I'm just going to give it a solid border because this will make it black by default. So let's go ahead and refresh that. So that puts a border around the entire table, but we really would like the cells themselves to have borders. So I'm going to have to go ahead and add that in as well. The cells are the TD tag, so let's use that. And we'll do the same thing here, a border solid. Okay. So there is our beginning portion of this. Now the next piece that we need to look at is how do I get this here to span across 2 columns? Well, in order to do that, I have to add a little bit of code here to our tag. So in this case, it's the mission details tag. I need to add in an attribute here called column span equals, and I have to tell it how many rows do I want it to span across. So in this case, columns, I want it to span across 2 columns. So I'll put 2 there. Now if I come back over here and refresh this, you will not notice any difference, because at this particular point there isn't any other data display, so it's not able to provide us a new look. Alright, so let's go ahead and we're going to continue down to the next line, excuse me, the next row. So the next row in this particular case is right here under mission details. So you would think this is the next row, but that's not correct. We've actually, because of this spanning that we are going to be putting in here, this will be the next row. So in order to make this the next row, I actually have to span these 3 cells by their rows. So let's go back up here, and I'm going to put a row span equals 2 to each of these. Row span equals 2, and row span equals 2. Now, if I refresh this once again, we're not going to notice anything. It's only until I put this next little bit of data, this next row of information in here, that anything's going to happen. So let's add another row tag. And then we're going to add a TD tag. And this first one is type. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to refresh the page, and I want you to kind of imagine in your head what's going to happen when I do this. Okay, so you'll notice that now that there is another piece of data in here, it's going to go in below in this open area underneath mission details, because mission details is only spanning one row. It's spanning 2 columns, but only 1 row. So there is a row available underneath here, one area that we can put some data in. You can also put one more piece of data in here because that is spanning 2 columns. So let's do our TD here. And then this is the objective. And we'll refresh. So there we have all of our information appropriately. Now it doesn't look exactly as we have here, but at least the cells are appropriately designed. So our mission name, launch, date, and country are spanning across 2 rows. Mission details is spanning across 2 columns. And then type and objective are in their own single cells. Okay, let's move on to our next line. So this is our Apollo 11 area. So we'll do a row here as well. So table row. And we need to do our TD again here. Now to make life a little bit easier for me, I'm just going to copy and paste this. You'll have the same ability to do this as well. So let's go ahead and put in, we have a total of 5 columns of data, so we'll need 5 TDs. Let's go ahead and get those started. And then I will paste the information in here for each one of these cells. And the country, USA. Okay, let's go ahead and look at that. Alright, so things are looking now good. We've got our first row set up here. Or excuse me, our next row set up. Now notice that this particular cell, the objective one, it's spanning 2 rows. So I need to make a change to that. I'm going to have to add a row span in here to equal 2. Now, as usual, if I were to refresh this, nothing will happen, and we won't notice any difference until, as I said before, we get to the next piece of data that we're put in here. So we'll put in another table row. We'll do our table data. In this case, we're going to have 1, 2, 3. We're going to skip this one. we're going to have 4 pieces of data. So let's go ahead and add those. Let's refresh our page. So there we go. Now we've got a pretty good look here. We've got our title area. We've got our 2 pieces of data. And now we just need to continue moving forward, completing each of these as we move forward. I'll go ahead and I'll do the next one here. This is for Voyager. So once again, we'll do a row. In this particular case, we actually have 5 columns here. I don't see anything that has been spanned across more than 1 column or row. So we'll have a total of 5 of our data points. So I can go ahead and just copy this in. And USA. Let's go ahead and refresh our page. That's looking good. Okay. So the last pieces that we have here is just an absolute duplication of the stuff above. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pause the video at this point, and I'm going to complete the work, and then I'm going to come back. Alright, so I've completed all of the data input at this point. So now if we look at our page here, we should notice that we've got 1 cell that's spanning 2 columns. We also have cells that are spanning 2 rows in multiple locations. So this is a good representation of the table that we've put together here in Word, except it's in HTML. Now we're going to do a little more work here with the table. We're going to be making some adjustments to the way the code is. And this is to allow CSS to be able to pinpoint certain areas of our table. This first one we're going to do is up here at the top. We're going to actually change these TD, these data columns, we're going to change them into headers. So we're going to do this by changing this TD here to a TH. So a TH indicates a header, so I'm just going to overwrite each one of these with a TH instead of a TD. Now this will not make a difference to the page except this. Notice that we've made some adjustments here to our borders, and this is because under our style we do not have a style set up for the headers. Now one thing I did miss was putting the headers down here as well, because these are part of the header row. Very easy to forget when you're working on these. So there we go. So if we wanted a border around the header a little different than we wanted for the other areas, we could make an adjustment here to add to our style. So let's just add a style. So let's put a border here, style. There, the border, we'll make it red, solid, 2 pixels. And let's refresh that. So there we go. So we've got a slightly different look for just our header, which is pretty common when you're putting together a table within any sort of environment. You want to make things stand out. This particular one in our Word document is not stand out, but that's fine. Alright, so let's go ahead and we're going to add another feature here. One thing you may have noticed here in the HTML, we've got this kind of doubling up of the border. So there's a little gap between everything. I'd rather have it look more like what we have in our Word document. We can simply do this by adding a command called collapse to our document. So we do this by doing border dash collapse, and we tell it to collapse. So let's refresh that. So that will collapse this back down. It didn't quite give me exactly what I wanted. This is because of the border that's around the table itself. But we could make an adjustment here. Instead of making a border here, why don't we make a background color to this? Instead of maybe a red, let's just make it a light red. It doesn't look like we're going to allow that, so we'll just say light yellow. It's not showing up. Oop, I got stuff on there I'm not supposed to have. So it got confused, so there we go. So now we have a light yellow color, and let's add back in the border. Just a solid standard color. Alright, so that looks pretty good. There are two other table elements that we could add in here. One is called the T head and one's the T body. Stands for table header and table body. So we can separate out the header portion of our table. So I'll just put T head here. So this will be around our header. And then around our body, we'll put T body. Once again, this will not do anything for the actual look of the table on the page directly, but we can impact this with CSS if we wanted to make some adjustments. So let's say we wanted to make the entire body of this document a different color. We could pinpoint the T body tag, and let's give it a background color. Let's just make it light green. How about light blue? That's fine. Alright, so tables, somewhat tedious to put together, but they can be done. It takes a little bit of effort and time to think through it as you're doing it. But if you walk through it, like I showed you here, you should be able to create any table you'd like in HTML. That's it for this lecture.